We went to when we got down to Virginia. I don't remember. I think I slept like most of the ride down there because I left my game on Friday night and didn't get home until 3 a.m. and we left at 7. So I got a solid 3 hours of sleep in my own bed. So yeah, I think I slept the whole way down there. We got Raising Cane's when we got down there. I ate a whole Caniac combo, which is like 6 chicken fingers, fries, 2 pieces of toast. My friends looked at me in amazement. They're like, "How do you eat all that?" I can eat.
I spent like 8 combined hours at 2 hospitals over the weekend. So, Derek, what did you do?
Well, I got on YouTube now. I actually saw your dog over the weekend. When I came down to cover the Minto documentary on Saturday, I always cut down right past your house, and there was a blonde girl outside with Rambo.
No way.
Yeah. I swear, yeah. Who was that?
What? Nobody ever told me about that.
Is Rambo cheating on you?
I know my friends walked at me, super excited to see me when I got back last night.
These people don't know how to walk me.
That's news to me, though. That's news. I'm going to have to ask.
Some blonde girl. I was going to stop and ask her, but I thought she'd think I was just a creepy old guy.
Maybe she was
which
there.
I am, but
maybe she was there to get a tattoo.
Today's episode is sponsored by Butler County Chamber of Commerce, Sprinkles Neighborhood Market, Robert Stevens Custom Jewelers, R.W. McDonald & Sons Incorporated. Thank you to our sponsors for supporting Eye on Sports.
Okay. Welcome to the latest edition of Eye on Sports, our sports podcast. I am Butler Eagle Sports writer Derek Pida. I'm joined by fellow sports writer Brendan Howe and Eagle Sports editor Jake Adams. Guys, I covered Karn City this past week against Brookville. They rushed for over 400 yards in that game, and through 2 games now, they have 745 yards on the ground. Now, Owen Higginbotham, Braden Slater, and Hunter Shear are leading the ground attack with 243, 138, and 117 yards respectively. Even though the Gremlins have won their first 2 games via blowout, the spreading out of the carries is this team's MO. 3 years ago, Karn City's Luke Gehring won the Butler Eagle scoring trophy with, get this, 12 carries per game. That's it, and he still won the Butler Eagle scoring trophy. I wanted to get you guys' thoughts on the running back by committee approach, which is what Karn City uses, as opposed to the one dominant back approach. Brendan, what are your thoughts here?
I think it makes more sense to have the committee. It's definitely kind of a luxury if you have the guys that can carry the ball, that you trust to carry the ball like that. Running the football is a very physical, taxing act, like just to run and get tackled that much. So if you have multiple guys that you can hand the ball to, that you know can get yardage, that you can can be productive, why wouldn't you do that?
Jake?
Well, I think really one of the beauties with high school football is that there's so many different schemes that can win football games. You've got wing T, you've got spread offense, you've got RPO, you've got I formation. I mean, some of them have come and gone. Some of them are more in vogue right now, but so many teams have different identities, and it makes it really entertaining. I want to throw this actually back to you guys. You guys have both had a chance to cover them now. What's been your takeaway from this? What has impressed you most about whether it's individual running backs or linemen that you've spotted on the field, or just the way the system as a whole is running right now? Well,
number one, obviously, when you're running for 745 yards in 2 games, they're kind of the unsung heroes up front, but Karn City has a very good line this year. Sean Schlagem, who I know is one of them. Cam Milley's another one. No matter who's running the ball, if the line's opening up holes, the backs are going to have more than just a few opportunities to make plays. And they got 3 guys who I'm convinced, Braden Slater, Owen Higginbotham, and Hunter Shear, I'm convinced all 3 of those guys could be the main guy if they were in an offense where one guy was getting 25 carries per game. But, if I had to choose between the 2, and we saw last year with Marsh, with one dominant back, what Evan Wright did. Obviously, that works if the kid can stay healthy, as Wright did last year. But if I had to choose one, I actually have to side with Brendan here. I know that's a surprise, but I would take the committee approach. There's no doubt in my mind that Karn City has several guys that could be the main guy, but spreading the carries out keeps each of them more fresh. than if they were getting 25 carries per game. And if one does go down because of an injury or if he's unable to go in a given game because of an illness, the other two guys are ready to pick up the slack. Brendan, what's your take on Karn City? You covered them in week 1 against Montauk, this running game and what it's capable of and exactly how it works and works well for the Gremlins.
Well, you brought up Evan Wright with Mars last year. I covered a lot of Mars games last year, and he wasn't the type of running back where he would go out and break 6 tackles, just run people over. He had vision where he would disappear into a hole, and suddenly, a second later, he'd be 10 yards past everybody. He'd just sneak past everybody, basically. Wasn't the biggest running back either. Then you look at these guys from Karn City. Something that stood out to me in that game is those kids aren't running for 25, 30 yards a pop without being touched. They are running into 3 or 4 kids and continuing to drive their feet and continuing to run the ball down the field. So something I was thinking about was I was on TikTok the other night, and Jake probably isn't as familiar with this, but you remember how Le'Veon Bell ran the ball? Like, just like the patience that he had.
Yeah.
I don't know why that popped up in my head. That was more of Evan Wright, but you see these Karn City kids, and you don't want to step in front of them at all.
No, I actually the game against Brookville the other night, Higginbotham ended the game with 2 touchdowns and 186 yards on 2 carries. And they weren't consecutive carries. They were just one came in the first quarter. I think the next one came in the other one came in the third quarter. But 2 carries, he had 110 yards. He had a 65-yard run and a 45-yard run. That's 110 yards in 2 carries. Cole Johnston is still learning the position of quarterback for the Gremlins. And obviously this running game can do a lot for them, and it's taken a lot of pressure off of Cole. I do think that when they go up against teams like Central Clarion, and they could meet them twice this year, Cole Johnston's going to have to make some plays through the air. Now, he's mobile himself. I think he had 44 yards rushing the other day, but in terms of the passing game, he completed 1 pass out of 3 attempts the other day, but you know that there's going to come a time when they're not up by 25, 30 points in the second half, and the passing game is going to have to make some plays. But the threat of the ground game can help with that. You know, bring the safety up, take one less defender out of the equation when you're trying to throw the ball. So not only is the ground game, on its own doing its job, but I think it's going to help Cole Johnston as the year goes on, as he tries to make plays downfield.
It's just dawning on me now, and you gave us the notes today or yesterday before, as we were starting to prep for the show. Like, we talked about Hunter Shearer a lot in the summer, and as you guys were trying to fill me in on like some of the scene and everything, he's third on the team in rushing. That just dawned on me. Like, this is a guy that we talked about as like he could be one of the guys in the area that we're going to be talking about a lot this year. And not to say that he's obviously not talented. It's just right now he's got 2 teammates in the backfield with him who have produced more. I wouldn't say are better, just have produced more than him right now, which is a testament to the way the system is working.
Yeah, Hunter Shearer had 770 yards and 10 touchdowns last year. And now, I mean, if you've got the talent to run 3 guys out there and each of them get 8 to 12 carries a game, I say do it. It keeps them, like I said, it keeps them more fresh. You're not getting one guy worn down. And it's Karn City's MO. It's worked for years, and it's working this year for them.
You guys have only seen 2 teams so far each this season, but with what we have with this sample size right now, what unit on any of the 11 teams that we cover has impressed the most? Is it Karn City's running game? Last week we would have said it's Mars's passing game based on what they did down in Florida. They got thrown back down to earth, on Friday night. But out of all that you've seen, either in coverage or in looking at the stats and everything, what's the unit, offense or defense, that's impressed you most so far?
I'd have to go with, as you said, this time last week we were talking about Mars's passing game, and they kind of got brought back down to earth when they played Bethel Park and lost 49-13. I got to go with Karn City's running game. I mean, they ran for almost 400 yards against Montauk, over 400 yards against Brookville. So if we're talking sheer stats, it's pretty clear to me that it's definitely Karn City's running game.
I agree there. I know we were all really high on Mars' passing game last week, and I still think that they'll figure that out. That Bethel Park team was very physical up front. They had the Division I recruit at defensive end, and you could tell who he was just by looking at him. The defense is something that they're going to have to kind of figure out, which I'll talk about during our picks. But, I'd agree with Derek there that Karn City's running game, especially, I know covered the Montauk game, is 59-0. I think Derek kind of touched upon. You can't really tell the strength in a blowout like that, but again, they play a team like Brookville, and they did what they did there. I did want to point out, because I went to last week's game, last Friday's game, expecting a shootout. I think all but one game I've covered since the start of last year has been decided by 19 points or more. I think there's a curse there.
Wow.
Blow out Brendan. Blow out Brendan.
So Butler, Meadville, Coach Chris, you better watch out, or maybe you're going to have a really good week this week, one of the two.
We have joining us today Mars boys lacrosse coach Bob Marcoux. He became head coach of the Planets in 2017, and since then the Planets have not failed to win a Whitfield championship. 7 straight on his watch, appearances in the last 4 state championship games, and a PIAA Class 2A state title in 2022. Guys, in one respect, that resume speaks for itself, but we are excited to have Bob joining us today to talk about the program's success and what goes into all that winning. Bob, we appreciate you joining us. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Derek. It's a pleasure to join you.
Bob, 3 weekends from now, you will be inducted into the Mars Athletic Hall of Fame. Talk a little bit about what that honor means to you and what it means for the program.
Thank you. I really appreciate the way you asked that question, because I think, as you and I have talked about, I really view this honor as a program honor. I'm fortunate enough to be the one who's been around the program the longest, so I'm the first eligible to join the Hall of Fame. I really think, though, this is a tribute to how far and how fast the program has come. So a ton of people have put in a lot of work and contributed to the success of this program, and I'm really honored to be the first of what hopefully will be many to join the Mars Hall of Fame. The first graduating class that went all the way through came through in 2016. They won't be eligible until 2026, but hopefully there'll be a whole bunch of Mars lacrosse players joining the Hall over the next few years.
Bob, I know you have a passion for lacrosse and a background that stretches decades into the past when it comes to the sport. Where did you grow up and how did you become involved in the sport?
Yeah, almost half a century. I grew up in upstate New York in a little town called Ithaca, a small college town. And when I was a kid back in the late 70s, Cornell University was winning national championships in lacrosse. So lacrosse was always a big sport in upstate. Syracuse is always a big lacrosse hotbed. And I grew up, first exposure to lacrosse was at the Cornell coaches, Richie Moran's quick stick camp. And, we weren't fortunate enough to have youth lacrosse back in those days, but the camp was what we could do every summer. My friends and I played a lot of lacrosse as kids, just throwing the ball around in our backyard. And then I started playing for Ithaca High School back in the early 80s. First came to Pittsburgh in the early 80s as well to attend Carnegie Mellon and played club lacrosse there for 4 years. Really loved it. Club lacrosse was a great experience for me. It was a lot of fun. It was pretty competitive, but it was also pretty laid back. And, I've had a love for the game ever since.
What brought you to the Mars area, and how did you become involved initially in Mars lacrosse?
Yeah, so first moved to Mars in the late 1990s, had bounced around. I stayed in Pittsburgh after graduating from CMU, had bounced around the South Hills for a while, but then got married and decided we needed to look for a great place to raise kids, and found this really nice neighborhood in Mars that seemed like the perfect place to raise a family. And we were very fortunate to be able to find it. So I've been here for closer to 25 years than I care to admit. I was also fortunate enough to have picked a house right between the Grecos and the Moyers. The Grecos' daughter was very good friends, best friends with my daughter, and the Moyers were just down the street, also good friends. Vince Greco was the first who decided to start the lacrosse program back in the early 2000s. And his first recruit was Brian Moyer, my other neighbor, and his 2 sons, Brendan and Andrew. So I was fortunate enough just to have moved in right between them. After they'd started the youth program, I decided that I could help, asked them how I could best help, and they were quick to get me involved.
Whose backyards and dining rooms were taken up for all the coaching and practice sessions early on?
Exactly. It was mostly Brian's. Brian had a great backyard, and we were back there constantly. It was a lot of fun.
So your initial involvement with Mars lacrosse, at that point, there was no high school team.
No.
It was youth lacrosse. What were your first impressions of the way the youth program was being run down there?
Yeah, really impressed with the way they got the whole community involved. It was a new sport to the area. As you guys know, lacrosse is not huge in Western PA. So a lot of the parents and a lot of the kids had really never heard of the sport. But I think what they did was really smart, which was one, focus on fun. The kids really enjoyed the game. They went out there, had fun. There was very little pressure to win. There wasn't even any pressure really to play well. And they did a wonderful job of getting a lot of people involved. In life, I think people tend to support what they create. And I think there were a ton of people who really believed they helped to create the program. And Vince really fostered that. And Brian, they really got a ton of folks involved. Anytime that kids wanted to play, Vince was making sure that their parents were involved and the parents were helping. And it really was a fun kind of community atmosphere.
Fast forward a little bit then, and in 2016, you guys win the Whitfield title when you were an assistant under Ed Monahan.
Mhm.
Shortly after that, you take over this program. So what was the influence of that period of time, winning Whitfield and all that came with it? And how did that kind of help you establish goals for the program when you took over and set about like trying to evolve it, take it to the next step?
Yeah, the other thing I think that the youth program did really, really well was I think they started the youth program with an eye on eventually developing a high school program, but they weren't going to start the high school program right away. Vince went to the superintendent of the school district and said, "We're looking to develop lacrosse as a high school sport, but we're not going to ask you to start it right away. We're going to develop the youth program first. We're going to come back to you in a couple of years once we've demonstrated that we've got the numbers, we've got the success that we think we can sustain it long term. And then we can start to develop a lacrosse program once we've got a good youth program to feed and make sure that the high school program was successful." So that's really where it started. We then started having some success on the field. The group of kids that were later to become our 2018 class, we took them to a lot of summer tournaments. We took them a lot of travel tournaments, took them all over and started having some real success. So I think in the back of our minds, we did believe that at some point, we thought we could build a pretty competitive program. We thought that we could build the high school program into the point where we could compete with the big boys, the Mount Lebanons, the North Alleghenies, the Shady Side Academies. We were having enough success in the youth level to think that, maybe naively, that we could compete at that level. So I think, once in 2016, when we won that first Whitfield Division II title, it really solidified the fact that we thought we had something pretty good going. And then in 2017, when I took over, the PIAA first made the distinction between AA and AAA, so that the teams of similar size could compete. Mars being a smaller school district, we were a AA school and didn't have to compete against the really large schools like the Mount Lebanons of the world, and against some of the Philly teams. So at that point, we really did set our sights on maybe possibly someday winning a state title. And we knew that from the competitive success we had during the summers, that and again, maybe naively, we did think that was going to be possible.
Yeah, and with the fans that come to the games or reporters like us that come and watch those games, I think it took 3 years for me to see a team stay within 10 goals of your program. So what goes on behind the scenes or in practice that kind of contributes to you guys' success?
Yeah, I'm a big believer in practice. The Navy SEALs say that in pressure situations, you don't necessarily rise to the occasion, you sink to the level of your preparation. So, we've always been huge on practice, but I think how I'd characterize our practices, we're pretty well organized. We've done a lot of work in working with the local college programs to design our practices similar to the way the college programs do. So I think organized would be one. I think the second part of our practices, they're super competitive. We're fortunate enough to have a lot of really good players, and they go after it in practice. They really get after each other. If you look at, we've had a good deal of Division I caliber players, and every day in practice, they get to go against another Division I caliber player. And you don't always get that in games, but definitely in practices, you get the opportunity to really sharpen your skills against some other really top-notch players. And these guys at Mars take advantage of it, and they really, really get after each other in practice. So I'd say they're super competitive. But then typically we have a pretty light group and a fun group, and we have a lot of fun at practices too. Lately, we've started this tradition where we've asked our seniors at the end of practice to say something smart. Well, they always say something. We're not always sure it's something smart, but it's always entertaining. And I think our players really get a kick out of that. And it's something that's kind of led to more of a fun atmosphere. You can still be really competitive, work hard, but still have a good time in practice.
Well, every team you've coached at Mars has been incredibly talented. 7 straight Whitfield titles, 4 straight trips to the state championship now. But the 2022 squad stands alone in winning a state championship. What are your thoughts on the makeup of that team, and why was it able to go to the distance?
Yeah, you touched on it. They were super talented, and they were also super gritty. Of that team, 7 of those players, 7 of our 10 starters, are now on Division I college rosters, which says a lot about the talent level of those guys. But I think really what set them apart was their grittiness. I mean, these were a really, really tough, gritty group of competitors. They went at it really hard against each other in practices every day. But I think more than anything, the experience in 21, when we came so close, in 21, we thought, we had a really good chance to win the state title. And we came up a little bit short against Allentown Central Catholic. And I know our players believed that we could have, maybe should have won that game. And that bus ride home after 21 was one of the most miserable experiences I've ever felt. We all felt like we let one get away. And that group, as gritty and as tough as they were determined not to let that happen again. So they came out with a focus starting in the fall. They continued all the way through the spring. And they really, every day came prepared to kind of, you never get to get a do-over, but they definitely wanted to take advantage of a chance in 22 that we to take advantage of, that we thought we let one get away in 21.
That 2022 team became the first team from Western PA to win a state lacrosse title.
Mm-hmm.
Did you get the sense going out there that you guys weren't just representing Mars, but you were representing the sport from the western side of the state?
100%. That's something that we always talked about. And, from the first day I got the job, reporters like you, maybe not you in particular, Derek, had asked me, do you guys really think you can compete with the folks out in Philly? And we had enough respect for what was going on with the Western Pennsylvania lacrosse to know that, yeah, we really do have the athletes. We've got the grittiness. We've got the toughness here in Western Pennsylvania, that we can compete with those guys out in Philly. It may be a little bit of a newer sport to us, but there's definitely that interstate rivalry that we thought, yeah, we were definitely carrying the mantle for the western side of the state, competing with Philly. We like to think that, that first year that we won it in 22, the state championships were always held in Westchester, PA. And in 23 and in 24, we believe we've gotten those moved to State College. Now that there's a representative from Western PA that every once in a while can make it.
Yeah, I think you guys had about a 5-hour drive for that state championship game. In Marple Newtown, it was like maybe a half hour.
Yeah, it wasn't even. I think they were about 10 minutes away, and they had a ton of fans there. But yeah, in fairness, we were the first Western Pennsylvania team to even make it to a state final. So, why should they drive all the way to State College to play a game that they could play in their own backyard? So, yeah, it was definitely something that we took a lot of pride in, and hopefully, represented Western Pennsylvania well.
That 2022 state championship final was a 9-6 win over Marple Newtown. Bob, I know we've talked many times. You are never short on your compliments regarding your assistant coaches and what they've offered the team. Who are the current assistants, and what role do they play in this team's success?
Yeah, thank you for that question, because I think these guys are incredibly hardworking. They're very, very much responsible for the team's success and don't really get the credit that they deserved. And one of the other big changes in 22 over the years past was that we did get pretty much a brand new assistant coaching staff. And these guys were very much responsible for, making the necessary changes that we needed to in how we went onto the field to help us win that 22 title. So first and foremost is Matt Gruss. Matt is now our defensive coordinator. Matt was one of the first hires I made back in 2017. Matt's done a ton for this program. He was a defensive assistant for a couple of years. He coached our JV team. And then in 22, when we turned over the coaching staff, Matt stepped up and took on the role of defensive coordinator. What Matt does really, really well is he is great at teaching the team concepts of defense. He's great at implementing our slide packages, making sure that everybody on our team is cohesive, they're working together, and that they're really communicating on the field. And Matt does a really good job of fostering that team approach. Matt was selected as the WPIAL the WPIAL Assistant Coach of the Year back in 22 as well. Also in 22, we had two new additions to the coaching staff. Stephen Latona and Kyle Savage came to us from, I think they had played together in college, had recently moved to the area. And in my first meeting with those guys, they came prepared with a full scouting report of our 21 team that was incredibly accurate, very detailed. And not only did they have a great scouting report, but they also had a great plan for how they would change our offense to really compete with the teams on the eastern side of the state and help us to win the title in 2022. We had been really in 21 a real free-flowing offense, and these guys helped us put a little bit of structure around the offense, but also make sure that we took advantage of some of the athletic ability and natural lacrosse ability of our players. There are co-offensive coordinators. Kyle Savage is really the fiery, emotional leader of the team. He's the guy that gets us pumped up, gets the team going. He's really our hype guy. Really good at coaching the offense, but also has done a great job with our face-off guys and has really taught our face-off guys and worked with them to improve their skills. And that's a big reason we've been so successful over the last 4 years is that, with Jack McKenzie and the rest of our face-off guys, we've had a huge advantage in having the ball most of the time. And in sports, when you've got the ball, it's tough for the other team to score. And Kyle's done a great job of working with our face-off guys to make sure that we've got the ball. What I like about Steven is Steven's much more of a calming influence. He not only coaches our JV team, is the co-offensive coordinator, but also runs our box and does the substitution for us. And while Kyle does a great job of getting us pumped up, kind of when we need to calm down and take the air out a little bit, Steven does a great job of taking the air out of, or calming us down and making sure that we're prepared to execute the way that we need to execute. Really good teacher on offense and has done a great job of working with the JV guys as well. Will Skersey is a newer addition to the coaching staff. Will is really the first one of our former players to join the coaching staff. Will was a captain of the 2018 team. He was our goalie. He had played 4 years at Baldwin Wallace and really brought a lot of that college, some of the college defensive concepts and college preparation concepts to the team, and is also really a tough, fiery leader with the goalies and with the rest of the defensive unit and has done a great job. And last but certainly not least is Bill Skersey. Bill and I have worked together with the youth program and the high school program for years and years. And Bill is one of those guys that even after his kids had graduated, decided that he was going to try to help the program any way he could. He's been our operations director. I call him our get it done guy. Whatever we need, Bill gets for us. And whenever I need some counseling or somebody to help me keep my sanity, Bill's always the guy there with some sage advice to help me out.
Wow, we got about a minute or so until we let you go here. So last question I got for you, at least, is I want to circle back to something you said a little bit earlier. The seniors, you asked them to say something smart at the end of practice. Can you give us like one good example, something like maybe not so smart that you've heard people to share with like
well, probably not suitable for the office kind of things that they said. But sometimes these guys would just completely draw a blank and just say something like good practice, and that would be all that they could come up with. And we made fun of a couple guys that would a couple times would just completely choke under pressure and not be able to say anything at all and would just come up with good practice.
Well, that's about all the time we have for you today. But is there anything else you would like to leave us with regarding Mars Lacrosse?
No, thank you guys for all of your support over the years. I think that what you guys have done to help us get the word out about our program, about Western Pennsylvania lacrosse has been very helpful. So thank you for all your support over the years, and go Planets.
Absolutely. We wish you and the Mars Lacrosse program continued success. I appreciate you joining us.
Thanks, Bob.
Okay, see you.
Hi there. This is Beyond Butler, our next segment where we usually talk about something outside of Butler County in sports, whether that be professionally or collegiately. I'm going to stay on the topic of college football, much like last week. On the way back from my trip last night, I was paying attention to Florida State's game against Boston College for a few reasons. Bill O'Brien was supposed to be the offensive coordinator of Ohio State, which won their game pretty handily this weekend too. But Florida State took their second loss this season, early in the season, after they were kept out of the college football playoff last year. Going 12-0. A big part of that is DJ Uiagalelei. I think I said that name right. You guys can correct me if not. But his play hasn't been up to par, being from the transfer portal 2 games in the season. The season is already kind of rocky for them, and their playoff hopes are kind of out the window already. So what do you guys, I wanted to ask you, think of the way that teams are ranked early in the season based off of what they did last year? Do you think that's a fair assessment, or do you think there's a better way to kind of get those teams ranked or kind of rate those teams before the season?
I've said for years I do not like preseason rankings when it comes to basketball, football. And I think a lot of it just comes down to hype. You know how they'll come out with a preseason All-American team. It's something to get people talking. But I've said for years I think they should wait, 3 or 4 weeks into the season to have the rankings then. And, let's face it, what did Florida State begin the season in?
I know they're number 10 as of yesterday. Let me look that up real quick.
Okay, well, whatever they were ranked, let's face it, if they didn't come out with the first rankings until, 3 or 4 weeks in, obviously they wouldn't be ranked. I mean, they've lost 2 straight games. So I think they should wait until all the teams have a few games in, because that's a much better barometer of where teams should be ranked as opposed to where they are ranked simply because of the starters they have coming back from say a good team last year or a great team last year. Because who cares as far as rankings go? It all comes down to what happens on the field, and so far Florida State is not performing.
Oh, but Derek, you missed the whole point that you said last week, is that there's no going back here. We've had this for years, and this is great fodder for debate Twitter and debate podcasts like ours.
I'll say this: there are a few times when I believe things are better now than they used to be. And when it comes to college football, I do like the playoff. Mm-hmm. When I was a kid, it was simply voted on. They didn't play a national. Every once in a while, you'd have a bowl game that was 1 versus 2, but that was very seldom. I like the fact that it's decided on the field now, and I didn't used to feel that way. I was okay with the votes and basically a fat sports writer in Chicago deciding the national championship. I like the fact that there's a playoff now. There are a few instances where I go with the current way things are done as opposed to 30 years ago.
So to clear things up here, they were number 10 in the preseason. Then they dropped out after a loss to Georgia Tech, who was also unranked. But losing to Boston College would have tumbled them completely out. But yeah, I think it's crazy that 2 games into the season, you can go from being regarded as the 10th best team in the nation to being regarded as a terrible team that has no chance of a national championship whatsoever.
Pitt, baby.
Eli Holston looked good last week.
He did.
I don't know. I think the preseason rankings give in part a barometer for where the season might go. Obviously, there's a whole lot of fluctuation. I think I heard somewhere over the weekend or late last week that no team that's been ranked outside of the top 10 in the preseason rankings has gone on to win a national title in like the last, several decades. It's been a long, so like there is some credibility here, but if we're looking at like how do we change this, there is no changing it. There's no formula that's going to properly predict anything, because it's human beings, especially 18 through 24-year-olds, playing a sport that has that is based around an oblong spheroid. Like there's a lot of randomness to it and variability, but it's just a real. This is this used to be sports bar talk. Now it's Twitter and Instagram and podcast talk. This is great fodder for keeping the sport conversation alive, and that's not just for college football. It's for we have NFL rankings. We have point spreads and win-loss over-unders and Super Bowl futures bets and everything else. Like this is part of the vernacular now.
I agree that there's obviously talk when it comes to power rankings, so to speak, in the NFL. But in the NFL, everything is still decided on the field. Mm-hmm. You can be the 30th ranked team in power rankings entering the NFL season, but if you have a 13-4 year, you're going to the playoffs. Whereas the rankings in football, in college football, that is, they have a direct effect on who makes the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
So
They tricked us into talking about college football again.
we're to the segment of the show where I either shine or crash and burn. Now, my answer to this question is not going to come till later in the show, but Brendan's got one for me. What do you got for me this week?
I'm staying with Pirates talk, much like last
Oh,
week, but there is football involved. Derek, who is the one Heisman winner to play for the Pittsburgh Pirates?
Okay, my answer will come later. Let me get on the internet and do some research. No, I'm just kidding. We're going to head right into pick time here. We're going to give some analysis on 5 of these picks, and the other 6 we're just going to give a final score. But the first game on the docket is Butler coming off their first win of the season, heading to Crawford County to play Meadville this week. Jake, what's your take on this game?
Well, much better showing by the Tornado last week. We kind of talked about it when we were doing these picks a week ago that, they looked better in their week 1 second half loss, or in the loss in the second half of that game than they did in the first half. They put up some points on the board. The offense started moving. We thought that maybe that would carry over into week 2. Clearly did. They won, I think, 42-0 in that game. I'm going with similar offensive output, but I think Meadville is going to be able to put up more of a fight. So my score, my prediction this week is 42-40 Butler. They've won this matchup 2 the last 3 times, and last year they didn't have Alec Teff at quarterback, who they do now, and he's been a bit of a difference maker so far for this offense.
Brendan, does your alma mater win on Friday? You'll be at this game, right?
I will, yes. Butler's hitting the road, as am I. Not discrediting their win last week. They won a football game. From my family went. My brother told me that Brashear had like 25 players total, which is a big difference from the Golden Tornado when we announced them. They had, I think, 50 or 60 at our first podcast there. So Meadville's team will match up a little bit better with them in numbers, and the fact that Butler has to hit the road. Coach Christie told me before the season that they're still trying to figure out the right mix of getting pumped up and getting going on the road. So I think Meadville wins that by virtue of that 35-20.
All right. I was looking at Meadville's numbers from last year. Pretty incredible, the rushing numbers they put up. They had 2 kids rush for 1,300 yards.
Wow.
Another kid rushed for 900 yards last year. As far as their stats this year go, it looks like they're throwing the ball a lot more, 327 yards through 2 games, but they're still averaging 275 yards per game on the ground. But I like the physicality Butler is playing with up front, and their skill guys are making plays. And I think it adds up for me to a 28-17 win Friday for the Golden Tornado.
I think Derek and I have picked Butler all 3 weeks.
I think all of us have picked Butler all 3 weeks.
Not me now. So
well, yeah,
I'm giving them some motivation heading into this week,
right,
because I don't want to watch a blowout.
The only motivation.
The second game we're going to talk about is Seneca Valley, 0-2 Seneca Valley playing Pine Richland. Right now, the Raiders are trying to break in a first-year starting quarterback in Andrew Lobig. He's struggled. He's put up some numbers in the first 2 games, but bottom line for me is they've scored 20 points in their first 2 games, both losses. Jake, how do you see the Raiders faring on Friday?
I don't see this going particularly well. They haven't yet found their rhythm on offense. I don't expect that to happen this week against Pine Richland. The Rams have a lot of new faces, but they're 2-0. They're consistently a contender within their section. I don't see that changing anytime soon. Pine Richland's going to win this one fairly handily, I think 38-10.
Brendan.
So I don't want to step on your toes here because I know what you're going to say, but anytime a team is able to beat another team that is regarded one of the best in the state in Central Catholic, it kind of turns some heads. And any team that can beat Central Catholic, you turn your head. So I think the Raiders offense has a lot of way to go still here in the season, so I'm going to go with Pine Richland to win this one 35-13.
Yeah, when you're trying to find your identity on offense, Pine Richland is going to be an extremely tough out. The game's at Seneca, but I don't think that's going to matter. I think the Rams are going to pull out a 31-15 win. Number 3, Knock. After a lackluster performance in week 1 against Kiski area, they came back last week and beat North Catholic Now they're going for 2 in a row. They're headed down to Fox Chapel to play the Foxes. Jake, how do you see this one turning out?
Well, first, we got to congratulate the Foxes. They snapped a 22-game losing streak. That's always great for high school kids to get a win that they haven't in quite a long time. I support any time that a team can do that, so that's cool for them. But I don't think they're going to make this a 2-game winning streak. Knox just the better team all around. I'm picking them 35-13.
Brendan.
I was wrong last week. My confidence in Tim Burchett and company has been restored. Knock 28-12.
Yeah, I know that at first game, first impressions, people kind of got down on the Knights. I was surprised that they weren't able to do more against Kiski, but I do think their offense is going to have a big year, and they got a good way to kind of bolster themselves for the rest of the season last week. The offense looked really good. I think Cody Mullen had 3 touchdowns. I think that offense continues to roll at Fox Chapel, picking the Knights 33-9. Now we got North Hills at Mars. Mars high the first week, down last week against Bethel Park. Brendan, we're going to go to you first on this one. They're hosting the Indians. The Indians are 2-0 themselves, so it's 2-0 at 1-1. Mars is hosting this game. Do you like the Planets?
I don't think that Mars will have another week like it did on offense as they did last week. The thing that is somewhat concerning over the past 2 weeks has been Mars' defense. They're playing another school, and Coach Eric Kasparovich touched upon this in his post-game speech last week, that North Hills isn't going to be any easier than Bethel Park was. They're the same size school. They're the same talent. So I am choosing North Hills to win this one 27-21.
Jake?
I think we got a little bit ahead of ourselves after week 1 with what we were the praises we were singing to Mars. They got thrown back down to earth quite emphatically last week, but I think they're going to start to rebound a little bit. Maybe that's a bit of a wake up call for this team that they've got to show up a little bit more urgently every week. I think that this will be an easier test. They should rebound. I'm going Mars 28-17.
You mentioned Eric Kasparovich said that it's not going to be any easier this week. I mean, look, he's the head coach of one of the teams involved in this game. I understand why he's saying that, but I do think there's a big difference between Bethel Park and North Hills. I think North Hills has a good defense. I don't think they're going to bring the firepower, the same firepower that Bethel Park brings in the running game or the passing game. I actually like Mars to get back on track here fairly handedly, 30-13 Planets. All right, now we got a local team, North Catholic, who's 0-2. They're looking for their first win. They're going down to Beaver County on Friday to face Blackhawk. Brendan, does North Catholic get off the schneid here and pick up a win?
I think away from home that they are unable to do so. Blackhawk will win a close game 17-16.
Jake?
We have a couple of teams left that are still winless here. I think North Catholic's going to be one of the first ones to get off that schneid, as you said. It's been a couple tough weeks for them, but the Cougars haven't won more than 4 games since 2019. They have scored a bunch so far this season, 85 points, but I don't think that they've been tested in one of those games nearly as much as North Catholic should test them. So I think this is going to be interesting. I have this being the closest score of these first 5 for me, 28-24 North Catholic.
I was looking at Blackhawk's schedule, and the first game they played this year, 2 weeks ago, they beat Beaver Falls 56-0. Now, normally Beaver Falls, you can count on them having a very strong team, but I did a little bit more research other than that final score, and I learned that the Tigers are rebuilding, and that's a quote from their coach. He said they right now have bottle-fed experience, which means they're babies. They're like little fawns trying to find their way through the woods. And they're 0-2, Beaver Falls is. So I don't think that win over Beaver Falls for Blackhawk 2 weeks ago carries nearly as much weight as it normally would. And I actually like North Catholic to go down there and pick up their initial win of 2024, 24-10 Trojans. Now, for these last 6 games, we're just looking for the score. Jake, we're going to go to you first on this one. Summit Academy at Freedom.
I got Freedom 28-14.
Brennan.
I have Freedom 30-12.
Freedom 33-12. St. Mary's at Karn City. The Flying Dutch coming down to face that vaunted ground attack for Karn City. Jake.
Karn City 42-7.
Brennan.
Karn City 40-12.
Karn City 35-16. I believe this is the game I'm going to be at, Jake. Quaker Valley at Freeport. Freeport coming off a loss, looking to rebound. What do you like, Jake?
Well, it looks like I have them scoring the most points on this list. 28-15 Freeport wins.
Brendan?
Freeport 21-13.
I like Freeport to win this game. I think it's going to be very tight. I think I'm going to be entertained by a slobber knocker, as they like to say. I like the Jackets to win this game 17-16. All right, another team in our area that's really struggling. Montauk headed to Punxsutawney to face the Chucks. Jake, does Montauk pick up a win here?
I do not think so this week. I'm going Punxsutawney 47-7.
Brendan?
Punxsutawney 28-6.
I got Punxsutawney winning this game 35-8. Union AC Valley. They've had some great games with Keystone over the years. Maybe this one turns out to be another one. Jake, you like the Falcon Knights going to Keystone?
I do. I picked them 21-17.
I like the Falcon Knights 25-22. Brendan?
Union AC 34-12.
Our final game that we're going to pick here is a road game for Slippery Rock. They're coming off their first win. They beat Franklin last week handily, but they're going to Sharon, and Sharon's going to be a much stiffer test for the Rockets. Brendan, who do you like here?
Sharon 40-6.
Jake?
33-14 Sharon.
Sharon 32-16. That wraps up the picks, and we'll be talking about Brendan's 0-11 record next week.
If I go 0-11, that means you guys go like 4-7.
Yeah, I don't think that'll be particularly good for any of us. I'm just shooting for 500 ball. Better than Pirates.
All right, we're back to the trivia question here. And Brendan, remind our listeners and our watchers what the question is.
Who is the only Heisman Trophy winner to play for the Pittsburgh Pirates? Two different sports. Heisman Trophy's football.
Right.
Pittsburgh Pirates.
No,
play
I have
baseball.
one. Did he actually play for the big league team?
Did.
Okay. I'm going to go with Joe Bellino.
Ooh.
Vic Janowicz, an Ohio State guy.
We know you love him.
That's
All right.
two Ohio State questions in a row, and he's got 2 wins.
I'm 1-2.
Heisman Trophy winners.
I'm 1-2. I'll try to get back on track next week. All right, guys. The final discussion topic we have here is this past Sunday, September 1st, was a year since Karn City quarterback Mason Martin collapsed on the field during a game against Red Bank Valley at Deal Stadium, and he was unconscious for months. Even after he awoke, he spent more time in the hospital. He did come home. He's recovering at home now. But I thought Irina, who is one of our staff writers upstairs, a news writer, did a really good update on his condition and his family's situation in the Butler Eagle recently. Brendan, you were here last year. Your brother's actually one who covered that game for us. What are your thoughts on what that family's been through, and just the fact that Mason's home and he is making progress after there was a lot of time a year ago where they really weren't sure if he was going to make it or not?
I remember I was at Newcastle covering Mars' game against Newcastle last year when my brother texted me. He actually called me and said, "Hey, this just happened on the field. What do I do?" I had no idea. I referred him to Tracy, our assignment editor, and he got to talk to her. But I remember at that moment just hearing that had happened, my focus, I remember I covered the game, but my mind wasn't on the game. I was thinking about what was happening there. So to see it go from such a scary situation then to hear that he's recovering and doing much better at this point, that whole process has probably been insanely tough for that family, just in the way they have to change their lifestyles and do what their jobs, things like that, just to make sure their kid, whose first priority has been doing better, is really commendable.
Jake, you started here at the Eagle in June, but I know you've read up on Mason Martin's situation. What do you take away from his ordeal and what the family's still going through to this day?
I mean, there's a lot to unpack, and I think everyone who hasn't already, which we got a whole ton of people who read that. I saw the Facebook comments, I saw the Google Analytics. That was one of our most well-read stories of quite a while. If you haven't already, go to butlereagle.com, check it out. There's a lot to unpack with this still. Their mom died in October after a 10-year battle with cancer. He, to my knowledge, wasn't alert to that at the time. So at one point he wakes up and he finds out his mom is also gone while he's sitting here battling for his own life. I can't imagine the trauma that is on top of what he's already dealing with internally. His dad admitted in the story that like he went through some really like dark times. His sister came home from college, dropped out or took a sabbatical basically for almost a year to help take care of her dad and take care of the house and everything else. It's interesting the way that they talk about it though. Now he feels very fortunate and he counts like his lucky stars, his blessings, whatever, every single day, that he still has another day with his son and his sisters do the same. And then you put that into this stark contrast to in the last month, you've had 2 kids in Alabama and a kid in West Virginia die of football related incidents. One of them was a collapse on the field during practice. Another one I believe was hit related, but I'm not 100% sure there. Like almost exactly a year after this community had to deal with stuff. And so you hate to say that the Martins are lucky because their son is in a wheelchair. He just learned was able to speak for the first time a couple years ago, just a word or two, I believe it was. But he's still here. He's got hopefully a long life ahead of him, and we'll see how much progress he can make over the next few months, maybe the next few years. I'm not sure how long this is going to be in whatever final stage he's able to get to. But then the story kind of ends with a little bit of hope too. His older sister, who's in college, is expecting her first child in a couple months here. Everyone's back home. The youngest daughter is in high school, I believe, playing lacrosse, I think it might be, or cheerleading. I'm forgetting off the top of my head. But there's a little bit of reason for optimism. I thought it was a good story by Arena, but a tough story too. And that was just a lot.
I read Arena's story, and the whole story really just kind of hit me. She brought up a lot of good points. She got a lot of good quotes out of the people she interviewed. She interviewed Mason's 2 sisters, his dad, Denny, and one of the sections of the story deals with Denny talking about how Mason's injury and the fact that he was able to pull through. And, he's recovering at home now. He's in a wheelchair, but Denny said it has changed the way he looks at other people. He said, before he would go to the store, he'd be out in public, he'd see somebody in a wheelchair, he wouldn't think anything of it. Mm-hmm. But when you think about it, and this is true, anybody that's in a wheelchair, there's a story behind that. How did they get there? Are they ever going to get out? I'm not going to turn this into a social commentary, but I do think the world would be a lot better place if people had more empathy,
Absolutely.
in general, toward their fellow man. And Denny said this whole ordeal has made him see things in a different light. He empathizes with people more, and I think the word faith is thrown around much too loosely these days. But I do know from reading stories, and they got the shirts with Strong 2, which was Mason's Too Strong, which was Mason's number for the football team, number 2, and on the back there's a Bible verse from the book Jeremiah. This family and their faith, if they didn't have their faith, I don't know if they'd be where they are right now. It has definitely helped them through, and it's going to be a big part in whatever this family meets with going forward.
Was there any additional takeaways that you had? You covered their game on Friday, and the coaching staff, I believe, wore pink shirts for Mason Martin. You talked to them a little bit after the game about winning, almost on the 1-year anniversary of that. Was there anything additional that you didn't kind of report on after that game that stood out to you?
Well, I do think, believe I threw this quote in the story. I actually talked to Zach Keppel before the game, because I got up there a good hour before kickoff, and he just made mention that anybody that plays football for Karn City, coaches, anybody who helps out with the program in any way is they're always going to be part of the Karn City football family. And obviously with Mason, he's never going to play football again. He was a senior last year, and he lost just about his entire season to this whole ordeal. But he's always going to be there's always going to be that common bond, not just with Mason and his teammates from last year, but anybody who's ever played football for Karn City. There's always going to be that bond there. And, is there a Karn City football alum out there that doesn't know Mason Martin's story? I think everybody's heard about it at some point, even if a person that played football at Karn City 20 years ago is living across the country. Everybody's heard about what happened to Mason and what he's gone through. So that bond is going to be something that Mason has for the rest of his life with former Karn City players and anybody affiliated with that program. And I think that's a good thing. It's going to be a connection that's there for his entire life.
And we obviously wish him and his family continued recovery and health and everything, and just his family, finding additional happiness every day, one bit at a time.
Absolutely. All right, we'd like to thank our sponsors, Butler County Chamber of Commerce, Robert Stevens Jewelers, R.W. McDonald's and Sons Incorporated, and Sprankle's Neighborhood Market. We encourage you to subscribe to the YouTube channel, the Butler Eagle YouTube channel, and follow us on social media and Butler Eagle News. We will be back next week. Thank you.